Hi everyone, and welcome back to a short little thing on Ubiquiti here at Entraz. I just wanted to come through and show everyone kind of how I'm using or how my network is set up. I changed it quite a bit from a few months ago. It was very interesting and kind of a crappy environment I had before. So I had two Juniper switches that were acting kind of as my data center switches. So I had like DC1 and DC2, and they connected up into kind of my home network. So these connected up into my another Juniper switch that allowed me to provide access between all of my different networks. The way this worked, however, is I had a Juniper SRX, which is Juniper's firewall, that kind of allowed or denied traffic between the two systems. So I went from a homegrown, really bad kind of environment to what you see now on the bottom right here with Ubiquiti. One of the things I wanted to do, however, is kind of explain to everyone how Ubiquiti works and how I'm making it work. Keep in mind, Ubiquiti is a great product. It has a few bugs to work out, in my opinion, of course, but it's actually a pretty nice setup, and the hardware is pretty top-notch. I've been getting really good transfer rates on a lot of my connectivity here. But what I wanted to show you was kind of how I have it set up, and just kind of an introduction to Ubiquiti in general. If you go to, let's say, UI.com, you can see they have a whole nice thing about how simple IT works. And a nice thing on the screen here, this actually does work. You can use your smartphone and it'll show you all the ports and connections you have from your smartphone using that augmented reality connection. Anyway, UI, it's pretty good. They have a lot of stuff here, but I'm only going to be talking about this from a network perspective. So if you want to roll through that a little bit, hey, more power to you. Keep in mind, Ubiquiti's not paying me for this. I just want to talk about it for those that want to learn about networking. So the Udm Pro is basically the brains. So you kind of have to have the brains of the environment here. So the Dream Machine Pro, or Udm Pro in this case, kind of handles all of the cloud-based management. Considering a lot of systems are going controller-based, cloud-based, kind of all the same type of stuff when you're talking about software-defined and software management, as opposed to, say, the Cisco CLI. Pretty soon, I'm thinking a lot of the CLI is going to be going away, and everything will be controller-based. Once again, this is a Cisco course, but we have to talk about this because it's still kind of important. The way I have it set up, I have connectivity from my Dream Machine Pro to my aggregation switch, and the reason they call it an aggregation switch is because everything connects to it. It's an aggregate. So you'll see here I have a 48-port Ethernet switch, so I got two of those for redundancy. And a long time ago, for my storage network, I got this 16XG, which is also a 10 gig switch. So everything connects back up to the aggregation and then back down to all of the devices. Let me get the bad out of the way. One of the things I truly dislike about Ubiquiti right now is the fact that you have to have two different devices for secure edge or secure firewall, especially if you're doing more of the business side and you're learning about natting and basically allowing internet traffic into your network. You can do that a little bit with the Dream Machine Pro, but I've only been able to do port forwarding, so a single internet connection is kind of all you got. So what I came through and did is, instead of connecting my internet directly into the Dream Machine, I have a Firepower 1010 appliance, basically Cisco's next generation firewall. And this has connectivity to the internet. The Dream Machine Pro has a couple of internet-facing ports. So let's just click on this really quick so we can mention. Come on. Okay, I'm going to go into network here, and Alright, devices, Udm Pro Ports. So you're going to notice here we have a Pro Aggregation. It's a 10 gig port that allows us to connect down to that aggregation switch. A SFP Plus or 10 gig WAN port, and a copper 1 gig WAN port. I believe you can use both at the same time, but you know, if you're coming from a really fast environment and you have 10 gig connectivity to your Udm Pro, I'm just saying you might not be using this, but that's just my thoughts and opinion right now. Anyway, I have my port 9 here WAN uplink that's connected into my Firepower appliance. I also have another connection here that's connected to my Firepower appliance as well. So we have an internet connection and a Firepower hen connection. We'll talk about that in just a second. So the single interface here for WAN and a single interface here for aggregation. So what you'll notice is my USW Pro aggregation switch here has a single connection to the Udm Pro, which is the brains, right? So what happens if the aggregation switch goes down or there's a problem with connectivity between the Udm Pro and the aggregation switch? Well, you guessed it. Everything basically kind of stops working, especially if you're only using this Udm Pro for all of your connectivity. Odds are it won't happen, but after a while of usage, it might be an issue. So I'm going to talk about what I did. So because I have the Firepower here, we have our WAN connection connecting into my Firepower appliance. I'm going to call this Entraz External. And the reason for that is the WAN port is connected into my Firepower appliance, and then it's allowed to get to the internet. Because going to unify.ui.com allows you to manage these devices from the internet. So you could actually be anywhere in the world, not on your local network, and you can manage your inside network through, of course, cloud connectivity. And you kind of need that, especially when configuring Ubiquiti, because there's a lot of intricate things to how that works. And we'll get into that too when we talk about voice communication. Of course, I have a port over here that's called hen, which also connects to my Firepower. We'll just name this H1. So you're going to notice right now I have my Entraz to the internet going that way. And basically this does port address translation. So anything that uses the Dream Machine Pro as its internet gateway, it will use this an external interface. I also have connectivity to H1, which basically allows connectivity into my home network. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. I also have a connection from my Pro 48 to my Firepower appliance. Now, a little backstory here. From the internet, I actually have 8 IPs that go into my home network. So I have one network, or I should say one internet IP for the Entraz External, which gets me to the internet. And I have another IP that allows me to, get into a specific VLAN on my Pro network. Now, if you remember what I said earlier about not being able to do like advanced NAT and like kind of advanced routing on the Dream Machine Pro, that's why I did this. So I have a VLAN on all of these devices here that allows the internet to connect into all of my home servers that need access. So like test.entraz.com, as an example, is going to be connected to one of these switches here that has direct connectivity to my Firepower appliance that allows the internet to come in and get to that particular device. Considering I can't do that with Udm Pro, which I'm very sad about, it's kind of how we have to design our network. So yeah, that's kind of my configuration on Ubiquiti for now. One of the cool things about Ubiquiti, however, is you do have the ability to run a call manager from UDM Pro, and you also have the ability to run Wi-Fi from UDM Pro. Now, one of the things, and this is kind of for those that haven't done it yet and annoyed the heck out of me when I first started getting into this, we're going to look at the configuration of my devices here. So we'll click on Network. Let me clear the screen. If we come over here to the Unify Devices tab and we click on PoE1 and go to Ports, you're going to see here that I have my 15HQ phones net that is basically a dedicated VLAN for my phones. All of my phones will be on this network. So if we connect down here into my talk network, you're going to see here that I have Unify devices that are connected. So I have the Touch Max and the regular Touch. These two devices here are going to have a connection into UDM Pro. You're going to notice here that they are on the 15 network. Now, if you're a network engineer implementing this for the first time, it really threw me for a loop because I didn't understand the requirements of UDM and their phone system. Maybe that's me just not doing the research, but I figured I would explain it here. One of the things you absolutely have to do when configuring a voice network in Ubiquiti, you come into Networks, and you have to create a network. Now, one of the things you're going to notice here is that I have Pro 48 as the router for my VLANs. Now, a lot of the times a core switch or whatever would be the default gateway or would hold that VLAN for all of your devices, right? That's what switches are supposed to do. They're supposed to act as the aggregate for your network. I had enormous trouble because I had the HQ15 right here using the Pro 48 as its router. Tons of problems. I expected that connecting a phone into a switch and that switch being its gateway, Unify would be unified and everything would work. Of course, that didn't work. So I eventually came around and said, you know what? Let me make UDM Pro the router for my voice network. And everything worked perfectly. So bringing in some of your network and enterprise understanding can really throw you for a loop when using cloud-based or proprietary hardware and software. Because it's proprietary, it has to be configured a certain way, otherwise it will not work. Otherwise, it works a lot like any other network. You create your SVIs or your VLAN interfaces and you apply it to whatever device you want to be its router. Like the hen network, as an example, is UDM Pro, and to your servers is UDM Pro 48. So PoE1 here, you're going to notice, is the router. You can come in here and you can change which device runs the SVI, which I find is bloody fantastic. Because if I have to update PoE1, well, I can just move it to PoE2. It does kind of suck because I do have a lot of VLANs, and I have to move quite a few of them if I'm going to make that work. Which is why I was hoping Ubiquiti had the ability to run something like HSRP, which is Cisco, of course, so like VRRP. If anyone from Ubiquiti is watching this, make VRRP a part of your Ubiquiti environment. That way we can have default gateways on multiple switches, and we don't have to worry about this update problem. You could, of course, use the UDM Pro as the default router for everything. But as a network engineer, I really don't like that. And the reason, of course, is, well, why do I want everything traversing to a router and then back down? So if I have, let's just say, my 3 switches here, and they all connect back to the aggregate, and here's my router. So I have a device here, a device here, and a device here, and they're all on different networks. To get to every other device, they all have to traverse the router first. And then, of course, once it hits the router, it comes back down. I don't like that, because if you remember what I mentioned earlier, what is one of the problems I find with Ubiquiti? Well, the Dream Machine Pro only has a single 10 gig interface, which means the aggregation has one connection to the Dream Machine Pro. Granted, of course, it is 10 gig. You could potentially add copper connections, but I mean, if you're running an aggregate switch with, what was it, 36 10 gig interfaces, you really don't want to go back down to 1 gig. So if they had the ability to run HSRP on their switches and gave us a couple more 10 gig downlinks from Udm Pro, we'd be able to have a nice little environment. So imagine if you have another USW Pro aggregation here, and you had another 10 gig port to UDM Pro, everything could have dual connectivity to 2 aggregate switches, and if the aggregate switches are running VRRP, well, that gateway can switch back and forth between the two. So if you have to update one, it doesn't go down. If you have to update the other, it doesn't go down. That's another one of the reasons why, if VRRP existed on these guys, they could have connectivity to 2 firepower appliances up top that are in a cluster or HA configuration. That way, if one of these devices goes down, you still have access to the internet. If one of these devices go down, you still have access to the internet. So keep that in mind. I do love what Ubiquiti is doing, but there is a lot to be desired when it comes to Ubiquiti. If you don't have the need to run a lot of advanced network services and features, this is great. I mean, you come in here, you have your network. So you have all this information about all the systems on the network. You have Wi-Fi, active clients, device types, information here. You even, pardon me, you even have a nice little representation of your topology. But once again, you see the problem. There's only one connection between the aggregate switch and UDM Pro. So what happens here? UDM Pro goes down, well, you just lost your voice. If the aggregate goes down, you potentially lost all of your network communications, unless, of course, you design kind of an out-of-band solution. So once again, I have my firepower appliances here, and they have connectivity to the, the 48 port switches. So if one of these switches goes down, you still have internet. If this switch goes down, you're SOL. If this router goes down, you're SOL. So a little bit of clustering in HA would be good. Now keep in mind, I'm not entirely sure they have this feature now. So if I'm wrong, I'm sorry, but I have not seen a way to really cluster UDM Pro, especially with a single 10 gig downlink. A single WAN port on each UDM Pro. So if they had the ability to create another UDM and another aggregate, and you can add that connectivity like this, then we'd have a redundant solution, and I could really see Ubiquiti entering the enterprise market big time. Because right now, I wouldn't stick this in my enterprise due to, lack of high availability and certain ports. Anyway, moving on, I wanted to show you Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is actually really cool here because you configure all of your Wi-Fi networks from one screen. It's so easy because you can manage your routing, your switching, your voice, your protect, your door access, and your Wi-Fi from a single interface. So this thing is really neat. There's a lot of options in here, and to be honest, it was actually pretty inexpensive. About $4,000, and I'm running a quasi-enterprise network at my home. It's actually really neat. You create your networks, as I mentioned before. You have your internet connectivity, and you'll notice we only have a single WAN port because the backup is a 10 gig link, and well, my Cox business here only has the ability to run a single copper connection. So unless I went out and bought a copper transceiver that would fit in that interface, one connection. We have the ability to run VPNs. So you have L2TP as a VPN option. And of course, site-to-site VPNs. I'm still trying to figure out how this works. So what would I have on the far end? Another UDM Pro? Secure key? Not quite sure yet. At some point, I'll figure that out and we'll talk about it. We have traffic management. So we have the ability to create static routes, traffic and device identification, and of course other various rules. We have firewall and security, which I really don't want to get into this because this makes no bloody sense to me. Ubiquiti, could you please make this a little bit more user-friendly? I mean, you click on LAN here, and it's like LAN in, LAN out, LAN local. What the bloody hell does this even mean? LAN in and LAN out? I mean, I look at it and you're like, LAN in, accounting defined network 10.0. Okay. LAN out. You also have here 10.0. But what does it mean? LAN in. LAN out. Well, I mean, you know, I think about it, LAN in. Okay, into the LAN. LAN in, the LAN into the network outbound. Which one is it? So what I hate doing, when a manufacturer creates something like this, I'm like, can you please explain it in easy terms? So like as an example, LAN in. The way LAN in works, example, allow source from network 100, 192.168.100.0. That's the source. The destination is whatever you want. That's LAN in. Or the opposite. LAN in, VLAN 100, unknown destination, or unknown source, destination 100. That is LAN in. I mean, come on. Can you explain it a little bit without me having to do some searching or playing around? I mean, seriously. Anyway, we have our port forwarding here, which allows us to, you know, forward ports. So if we have something hitting 10.0.0.2, which is my WAN interface, if it hits this IP here, we can do from any, and we can do, say, port 443. So if something has a destination of 10.0.0.2:443, I can forward this to one destination. Well, what if I have like 4 physical web servers on my network? It's not going to work unless you use custom ports, which you're going to tell people, oh, if you want to go to my website, go to www:444. Yeah, no, that's not a good idea. So please add a little bit more advanced NAT services. That would be really nice. Profiles, however, is really cool because a profile allows you to create trunk ports and voice ports. So let's see, NTR servers computers. This allows us to tag VLANs. So if I'm connecting up to an ESXi host or a Proxmox host, and it's on the, I have a VM on the 10 network, it's allowed because it's tagged on 10. If I have a VM tagged on VLAN 4, it's allowed because it's VLAN 4 and it's allowed. So there you go. There's your trunk port. If you have access ports, so as an example, I have NTR admin profile, which is the connectivity for my admin PCs. You're going to see here I have my native network, which is like an access port, switch port access VLAN X. That's the native or untagged network. And you're going to see here we have our tagged networks for my voice network. So in Cisco, it's switch port voice VLAN X. Basically what this means is the phone is going to tag with a voice VLAN, and that's how this is allowed. Of course, you also have to specify the voice network. Of course, I'm not really sure why this is here, because if I want to have a voice VLAN on my phone, I have to go into the phone and configure it locally to the phone. So what's the point of that? Who knows? Maybe they're getting ready to make LLDP actually tell the phone which VLAN it's on. And lastly, of course, we have some system stuff. We can change from light to dark. Of course, I'm a big fan of dark. As you can see, it's pretty dark in here. Territory, language, time format, update settings. You can do device update caching, which is cool. You can do backups, schedules, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so let's go back to our network devices. So the way this works, because it's all software-based, it's kind of annoying. It really, really is very annoying that I can't come in here at the CLI. I've been doing Cisco networking for almost 20 years now, so you can imagine. So I come in here to my USW Pro 48 PoE. It tells me all the clients, some various information in here, which is really cool. However, when you look at ports, you can see your ports. If I want to change port 19, I click on it. I can give it a name, and I can give it a port profile. Now you can do all VLANs, if it's like a trunk port, disabled if you want to disable the port, or you can specify the network that it's in. Now keep in mind, this is the equivalent of doing a switch port access VLAN, switch port mode access. So it's really only going to be untagged traffic. Coming down here to the profiles, well, this is called custom here. Why is this called custom? We come over here to settings, profiles, and here's our profiles. NTR admin profile. Well, it does tell me switch port, so I guess. So let's come back over here to port 19. Go back down to custom profiles. Here's my NTR admin profile. So when I click this, apply the changes, and that will be applied to port 19. Now one of the things, however, let me come back out here. NTR DMZ servers. It's currently disconnected, so it doesn't matter. We'll come down here to NTR admin profile and apply the changes. Look what it does. It drops me out of the port. All the way out of the port. So I need to go back in to port 19 to configure other things, such as port profile override, or MAC filter list, or even the name. So like if you come in here to a port, let's find one. Here we go. Port 21, let's name this. NTR port. We're going to put it into a port profile of NTR DMZ servers and hit apply changes. Alright, the port changes were saved. Okay, which port were we in again? Port 21. NTR port. There you go. Now you have your NTR port, and it's in the port profile, and you can change things if you need to. But I really don't like that it drops you out of the port configuration when you're applying to that port. But other than that, it's pretty neat. You can hover over each individual device port, and it'll tell you the name, and it'll tell you the profile. So that's pretty neat. We also have the ability to do aggregation, as you see here. That's why we have the 20 gig. So you see here how we have 20 gig experience. That's because I've come over here on my 48-port PoE1 and did an aggregation to 10 gig uplinks to the USW Pro aggregation switch. On the Pro aggregation, you're going to see here that I have aggregates that are going down to my XG16, PoE1, and of course PoE2. I also have 10 gig connectivity to servers here. So as you can see, I did the NTR storage profile for this particular port, which allows my server 10 gig connectivity. And then of course I have my 10 gig connectivity to my UDM Pro, which once again I only have one. But you can also use these uplink ports for other things, such as storage connectivity. So you'll see here I have my QNAP 10 gig here. Yeah, so I have my phones. So if we come down here to protect, you can run cameras on this device, and it has a hard drive that you can include here, and it also has talk. So under talk, you can see all of your calls, you can see all of your call experiences, most active users. You can look at the phones that you have connected, the phone number that people can call. You assign your users to different devices, and of course the numbers to those users. You can have a smart attendant, which is actually really cool. And then of course call logs, help, and of course settings. So you can do call settings, global contacts, numbers, and subscriptions here. As you see, it costs $10 per phone number, which really isn't bad. You can specify emergency calling and of course system settings as well. So overall, I actually really like the Ubiquiti systems. I just think that they could do a better job at providing VRRP, more redundant links, more high availability features. One of the other things I really dislike about Ubiquiti, though, is when you're updating. And the reason why I want VRRP is because, well, if you update your switch, it takes it down completely. In-service software updates, that would be really nice to have. So I really hope the people of Ubiquiti look into this because, well, I think it would be a true enterprise product if they would just make it a little bit better. So yeah, that was my video on Ubiquiti. Don't get discouraged based on what I'm saying, because you can actually do a lot of really neat stuff in here, like throw in firewalls and have completely different, routing. Throw a firewall in there and you don't even have to use the UDM Pro except for some of your voice stuff and Wi-Fi stuff and, cloud configuration. So yeah, there's that. I'm going to review this. I think there might have been some things I left out, but if that's the case, I'll just create a separate video talking about, my network and how to set up an enterprise network from here. So yeah, thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.